When you talk about those complexities, I mean, you talk about United Nations missions, and that's something that very often, if we're going to be honest, is a bit of a touchy topic when it comes to Israel, especially with what's been seen now on the Lebanon side, with the tunnels that were basically built under the eye of so many of those missions. So what for you stood out to make you feel like, no, there is something that is going on that's wrong, which needs to be stamped out and noticed and have a conversation around, as opposed to what, without being too crude, it may be the status quo?
Yeah, look, there's a bit to unpack there. Looking at the United Nations, I'm a believer that an entity like the United Nations is necessary. The UN, of course, is only 80 years old, and it came about from the failure of the League of Nations earlier than that. But let's call a spade a spade. The United Nations has failed in a number of respects, not only the Jewish people and the state of Israel. I don't have many kind things to say about the current UN Secretary General Guterres. Indeed, one of the articles that I published a couple of months ago was titled Anatomy of a Failed Leader. I do believe that having a vehicle to allow people in disagreement to talk is better than not having that. But the UN is not fit for purpose, and I'm passionately of the view that money needs to stop flowing into the United Nations. Some performance targets need to be set, and I think the number of staff needs to reduce before it builds up better, because it's not currently fit for purpose. We saw that in 1967, where before Nasser in pan-Arab nationalism was talking about murdering all of the Jews in Israel, the United Nations withdrew from the Sinai. Part of the legal terms behind there is that peacekeepers were there at the express permission of both of the parties. When one of the parties, Egypt, withdrew approval, unfortunately, the peacekeepers there to keep the peace withdrew. And you fast forward to late last year, where the democratically elected Prime Minister of Israel was to say, United Nations, we've got Hezbollah infrastructure right up to and including and under your positions. Please move out of harm's way so that you don't get caught. And the United Nations of late 2024 said, no, we're staying in position. That's just an outrageous double standard. And I would love to see those people in leadership positions held to account, them being removed from their positions. That's just one of the examples that is
basically putting themselves as human shields to an extent.
Yeah. And other examples of, I think, systemic failure are the ICC, the ICJ, United Nations, Human Rights Council, all virtuous organisations, but none that are fit for purpose. My personal view is that the organisations are necessary. They've got a people problem, not an institutional problem, and there's a number of people that need to be removed from those positions. And I think denying funding to those bodies is the way that you do hold.
That's how you have a turnover. Yeah. So that's more on the broader structural sense. I'm talking more on the personal sense, actually seeing things and realising the situation on the ground. And what are some of those specifics that you noticed, which aren't necessarily spoken about by other people who have been deployed over there?
Yeah, I think what, while we've been busy with other things, I've been head down, tail up, 31 years in the profession of arms. I've got a real belief in service, and so I have a kinship with the Jewish people and diaspora worldwide that, in the last couple of decades, they've been helping every other minority group that is facing persecution. If you look in Australia, for example, some of the leading lawyers and philanthropists in the Australian community that have helped Indigenous rights have been, wonderful Jewish Australians. There's been such a betrayal at the time, Jewish people's time in need, when Israel was attacked. in a horrible pogrom on the 7th of October, all sorts of people the Jewish diaspora have been supporting for decades turned their back on them. And I think one of the concerns is that we're facing a level of gaslighting and projection of Orwellian proportion. And part of the causal factors there is that there's just a constant bombarding of anti-Israel, anti-Jewish propaganda from failed legacy media outlets. The Australian Broadcasting Corporation is a case in point. Across in the United Kingdom, the British Broadcasting Corporation, and there's some big challenges over here in the US with some of the legacy media organisations as well. That combined with, I believe, a hostile takeover of one of the two major political parties in Australia, that is the left of the ALP, is demonstrating, anti-Semitic tendencies.
You see, the ALP has completely shifted. I mean, from the era of Bob Hawke, who famously said, when the chime bells ring for Israel, they ring for the entire globe.
Yep.
Meaning, you have to stand up for Israel to what unfortunately Albanese and Penny Wong and co have been doing over the past few months. It's just or few years. It's just devastating. But my question is more about you in the Middle East. And what are some of the actual things that you saw? Are there any things that you can point out that you actually saw there that really demonstrate how bad the actors are in Hezbollah and some of the other nations that call to attack Israel?
Yeah, I was an unarmed peacekeeper, but I'm eyes wide open to some of the threat forces. Hezbollah in the north are not only posing an existential threat to Israel, but they're posing an existential threat to the fabric of Lebanon. Lebanon could be the Paris of the Middle East. It's an amazing country, beautiful natural resources. It's comprising Sunni Muslims, Shia Muslims, Druze, Christians. It's heartbreaking what we've seen in the last 40 years, so since the civil war in Lebanon. Hezbollah is holding that amazing country to ransom, very similar to the Muslim Brotherhood, Gaza, Palestinian Islamic Jihad. There's a lot of similarities to what we saw in Al-Qaeda and Islamic State, or further over into Afghanistan, where you're looking at the Taliban and the Haqqani network. And so violent Islamic militant fundamentalists, jihadists for simple, pose a threat not only to your family and yourself, but to me and mine. And as a soldier, I'm eyes wide open to the consequences and the second order effects of people like me staying silent. I'm acting with my conscience. I'm speaking out against anti-Semitism, not from a political perspective, because for 3 decades I've been strictly apolitical, but politically informed. Combating anti-Semitism is just the right thing to do, and I'm determined to do everything in my power to move the needle on a very worrying trend.